Yes, so since the budget, we've continued to engage with the UK Treasury, and that's not just the Betting and Gaming Council or the Gibraltar Betting and Gaming Association, it's the government of Gibraltar as well, people like Minister Feetham. We're still talking to the UK Treasury about this dramatic tax increase that the Chancellor announced. I had a meeting with the Treasury last week on this subject, and what we are trying to do is explain the dramatic consequences that there are going to be from these changes. That's something we were doing before the budget as well, of course. What we're now trying to do is continue to deliver that message, but also suggest perhaps some ways they could mitigate some of the negative consequences, such as the impact on jobs, and particularly the impact on the black market. Because what the Treasury themselves have said in the documents they published on Budget Day is they acknowledge that this dramatic, almost doubling of the gaming tax rate will result in some customers migrating into the black market. That worries us especially because those customers are not going to benefit from the consumer protections that they would get in the regulated market. And what it also means from a government perspective is they're going to generate less tax than they might have thought.
But you said all this to the Select Committee ahead of the budget anyway. Have you any more of a sympathetic ear now?
Unfortunately, it hasn't been hugely successful, if I'm honest. I was in the Treasury last week. They're listening, but I think their position is the decisions have been made. The Chancellor has set out her position. And just yesterday, we saw the finance bill going through the second reading in the UK Parliament. That means it is now substantially progressed. And this policy comes in from the 1st of April, so just 3 and a bit months from now. So sadly, I don't think we're going to see a dramatic change of this policy, but that doesn't mean we're not going to keep engaging.
And how is the industry preparing to mitigate for the damage that this bill will do?
We've seen businesses taking a number of steps. Just last week, we saw one of the bigger operators that based in Gibraltar announce what they've called a strategic review. They're thinking about whether they can sell the business or sell parts of the business. Other operators in this sector are looking at how they can reduce costs to brace for the impact of this dramatic tax increase. And they're looking at the kind of things we'd expect. So they're looking at whether they can reduce the level of marketing, whether they can be less generous with bonuses and promotions. And sadly, they're also looking at whether they have to reduce headcount in those businesses. Those are the kind of things that are happening right now. I think we'll start to see some of that play out in early 2026. We have to keep an eye on it, but that's what's happening at the moment.
And what do you suspect or predict the impact will be to Gibraltar?
What happens is if businesses in Gibraltar are that much less profitable because they're paying this much more UK gaming tax, there is less money to be taxed in the Gibraltar economy. So we've already heard Minister Feetham talk about the dramatic impact this could have on his corporate income tax receipts. And on top of that, if there are fewer people employed, that's going to have an impact on income tax and social insurance as well. And whilst I know the numbers are still being crunched, what I can tell you is before the autumn budget, these businesses were already very heavily taxed. Their effective tax rate was around 65%. So if you added up all the taxes they were paying and you looked at that as a proportion of profit, 65%, really, really high. With these tax increases that the Chancellor announced, we're going to see that effective tax rate increase to more than 80%. In some cases, it'll be approaching 100%. What that tells you is that these businesses are going to really struggle to make a profit in the UK market. They're going to have to reassess whether they spend as much time and effort in the UK market. And from a Gibraltar perspective, we know that most of the businesses here have a bias towards the UK market. That's particularly the case since Brexit. So they are going to see a dramatic impact on their profits, and we're going to see a dramatic impact, sadly, on the public finances of Gibraltar. And if you think a step further about what that means for Gibraltar, you're going to see that that money that is used to pay for all the things that we enjoy here, like the GHA, housing, the civil service, is going to be under pressure. There is going to be less money available for the government here.